Imagine this. You wake up in a room you don't recognize. The walls are bare, the air stale. A mirror hangs opposite you, and when you look into it, the face staring back is yours, but not quite. The eyes are hollow, the mouth set in a grimace of practiced neutrality. You touch your cheek, and the reflection mimics you, yet something is off. The longer you stare, the more the reflection feels like a stranger wearing your skin. Then the realization hits. This is you. The you that laughs at the right moments, nods in agreement when expected, swallows every unsaid word. The you that has been carefully assembled piece by the expectations of others. The you that walks through life on autopilot, following scripts written long before you were aware you were reciting them. But beneath that surface, there's another voice. Faint, almost drowned out. It whispers, "This isn't you at all." Here's the paradox. You are both the person in the mirror and the one watching it, horrified. You are the actor and the audience, the prisoner and the warden. How can this be? How can you be so intimately familiar with yourself and yet feel like a stranger in your own mind? Think of the last time you made a decision that felt truly yours. Not the job you took because it was safe, not the words you bit back to keep the peace, not the identity you've adopted because it was handed to you like a uniform. When was the last time you acted not out of habit, not out of fear, not out of the invisible pressure to conform, but from something raw and unscripted within you? We like to believe we are the authors of our lives. Yet most of us are ghostwriters, composing stories for characters we've been told to become. We mistake the map for the territory, the mask for the face. But what happens when the mask starts to fuse with the skin? What happens when you forget there was ever a face beneath it? This is the silent crisis of self-estrangement. It's not that we lose ourselves in dramatic, cinematic moments, no grand betrayals or sudden amnesia. It's a slow leaching, a quiet replacement. One day you wake up and realize you've been living a life that doesn't feel like yours. You follow the motions, you say the words, but somewhere along the way, the core of you, the wild, untamed self that once questioned and raged and dreamed, has been buried under layers of should and must and can't. And so the great question emerges: how do you walk away from a version of yourself that has become a prison? Not in the physical sense, not quitting your job or moving cities or shedding your name like an old coat. Those are surface rebellions. No, this is deeper. How do you untangle yourself from the stories, the assumptions, the identities that have been grafted onto you? How do you reclaim the parts of you that have been exiled? The answer is not a simple one. It's not a matter of willpower or positive thinking. It requires something far more dangerous: the willingness to confront the illusions you've mistaken for truth. It demands a dismantling not of your life, but of the myth of your life. The myth that you are who others say you are. The myth that you have no choice. The myth that the reflection in the mirror is all there is. This is the journey of the man who walked away from himself. And it begins with a single, terrifying realization: you are not who you think you are. The question is, what will you do about it? The man in the mirror is not an accident. He is a construction, an elaborate, unconscious collaboration between society and your own mind. To understand why he exists, you must first grasp the machinery behind his creation. From the moment you could speak, you were taught to perform. A child learns quickly. Certain behaviors earn love, others provoke rejection. You laughed when you were supposed to, nodded when expected, buried anger when it wasn't safe. This is how the false self emerges, not as some sinister plot, but as a survival mechanism. Psychologist Donald Winnicott called it the caretaker self, a mask worn to navigate a world that rewards conformity and punishes deviation. But survival is not the same as living. Carl Jung saw this division as the root of modern suffering. He called the rejected, hidden parts of ourselves the shadow, the instincts, desires, and truths we disown because they clash with the image we've been taught to uphold. The more we deny these fragments, the more they fester in the unconscious, leaking out in self-sabotage, inexplicable rage, or a gnawing sense of emptiness. Philosopher Martin Heidegger identified another layer, the they-self. We are born into a world already humming with assumptions about success, morality, worth. Over time, we internalize these voices until they feel like our own. They say you should settle down by 30. They say ambition is virtuous. They say suffering is noble. Who are they? No one. Everyone. A chorus of inherited dogma. Friedrich Nietzsche called this herd morality the uncritical adoption of values simply because they are handed down, not because they resonate with your deepest truth. The result? A life lived in quotation marks, every decision prefaced by an invisible, they say. Here's the cruel twist. You believe you are free. You make choices, jobs, partners, lifestyles, but how many of those choices are reactions, not creations? How often do you act from fear rather than despite it? Jean-Paul Sartre saw this as bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves to avoid the terrifying responsibility of true freedom. It's easier to say, I had no choice, than to admit you chose comfort over authenticity. Even your desires are suspect. Modernity bombards you with manufactured cravings by this, become that, aspire to this version of happiness. The French theorist Guy Debord called it, the spectacle, a world where life is no longer lived directly but mediated through images, advertisements, and curated identities. You don't want what you want what you've been told to want. The most insidious part? You cling to your chains. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, observed that humans can endure almost any how if they have a why. But what happens when your why is not yours? When you grind through decades of work for a dream you didn't choose? When you mold yourself into a relationship that suffocates you simply because it's easier than facing the abyss of uncertainty? Arthur Schopenhauer put it bluntly, most men are not themselves. They are what others make of them. This is the hidden problem. You are not lost. You were manufactured. Layer by layer, compromise by compromise, you've been shaped into a socially acceptable forgery of yourself. And the worst part? You volunteered for it. Every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, every time you mistook approval for worth, every time you confused fitting in with belonging, you handed another piece of yourself away. But this is not a condemnation. It's a revelation. Because if the false self is constructed, it can be deconstructed. If you were shaped, you can be reshaped. The question is no longer, why do I feel this way? It's, what will I do about it? The tragedy of self-estrangement is not that you lose yourself, it's that you don't notice. Like a slow poison, the effects are invisible until the damage is irreversible. Your body knows before your mind does. The clenched jaw upon waking, the hollow fatigue after a day of performing, the inexplicable rage at small inconveniences. These are not random malfunctions, they are protests from the self you've buried. Psychosomatic research confirms what the ancients knew: the body keeps score. Chronic stress, autoimmune disorders, even unexplained pain often trace back to a life lived in misalignment. Your cells rebel when your soul is ignored. But the mind has its own defense mechanisms. Cognitive dissonance papers over the cracks you rationalize, you numb, you distract. This is just how life is. Everyone feels this way. I'll figure it out later. Later becomes never. The gap between who you are and who you pretend to be widens until one day, you can't bridge it anymore. Apathy is the final stage of self-betrayal. When you've spent years silencing your instincts, a terrible numbness sets in. You lose the ability to want. Not the superficial wants, the new car, the promotion, the hollow validations, but the deep, pulsing yes of true desire. The kind that once made you stay up late with excitement, the kind that pulled you toward risk and mystery. French philosopher Albert Camus saw this as the core of absurdity. The literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself. When you live disconnected from your essence, life becomes a series of distractions from the void. Society rewards your surrender. Consumer culture thrives on your dissatisfaction. If you felt whole, you wouldn't buy the solutions. Social media monetizes your self-doubt. If you were secure, you wouldn't crave the likes. The entire architecture of modernity is designed to keep you restless, hungry, and just empty enough to keep consuming, but not so empty that you stop functioning. Worse yet, your alienation is contagious. Relationships become transactions. You love what people can do for you, not who they are. Conversations become performances. Even your rebellions are pre-packaged. The trendy cynicism, the fashionable discontent, the outrage that follows algorithms rather than conviction. In your quietest moments, they haunt you. The version of you that left that toxic relationship years earlier. The path not taken when you chose security over calling. The words you never said because you were afraid to rupture the peace. These phantom selves don't disappear, they live in the periphery, whispering of what could have been. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung called this the unlived life, and warned that it grows more dangerous with time. Nothing affects the life of a child so much as the unlived life of the parent, he wrote. Your denial doesn't just atrophy your soul, it becomes legacy, passed down like an heirloom of quiet despair. There comes a threshold. For some, it's a panic attack in a boardroom. For others, a divorce they didn't see coming. Sometimes it's subtler, a single, paralyzing moment in the shower when you realize you can't name one thing you genuinely love about your life. This is the hidden toll. The longer you wear the mask, the harder it becomes to remember your face. And one day, you might wake up to find there's nothing left to save. But this is also where hope begins. Because rock bottom is where illusions shatter. That moment of unbearable clarity, that's your soul fighting back. The grief you feel isn't just loss, it's recognition. The part of you that still knows truth is alive, buried but breathing. The man who walked away from himself didn't do it on a whim. He did it because staying became more terrifying than leaving. Because the pain of authenticity finally seemed lesser than the pain of the lie. The question is no longer, why is this happening? You know why. The question now is, how do you come back to life? The moment you realize you've been living a lie is also the moment you become dangerous. To the systems that trapped you, to the people who benefit from your compliance, and most of all, to the false version of yourself that's ruled your life. But rebellion isn't about burning it all down. It's about something far more radical, building something real. Before you can dismantle the false self, you must see it clearly, and this requires brutal, unfiltered self-awareness. Psychologist Carl Rogers called this unconditional positive regard, not judging yourself for what you discover, but observing it with detached curiosity. Imagine sitting with questions that cut through the noise. When did you last feel truly alive? What truths about yourself have you been pretending not to know? If no one were watching, what would you stop doing immediately? This isn't mere introspection, it's excavation. You're digging for the buried, no, you've swallowed your whole life, the one that pulses beneath every compromise. That no is your compass, and it will guide you back to yourself. Society pathologizes selfishness, but there's a difference between exploitation and self-preservation. Friedrich Nietzsche's dictum, "You must become who you are," isn't a gentle suggestion, it's an ultimatum. Start small, with acts of quiet defiance. Say, "I don't want to," without offering justifications. Cancel plans that drain you, not with guilt, but with the understanding that your energy is finite and sacred. Spend time alone, not scrolling, not consuming, just being in the raw silence where your thoughts can finally breathe. This is the beginning of boundary setting, the foundation of autonomy. Every no to others is a yes to yourself, a brick laid in the reconstruction of your identity. Your false self was built to please. Your real self will disappoint, and that's the point. Family, friends, colleagues. Some will resist your awakening because it holds up a mirror to their own surrender. Let them. As James Baldwin wrote, you have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not its idea of you. This isn't cruelty, it's integrity. The people who belong in your life will adjust to your truth. The others were only ever loving a shadow. You've been conditioned to distrust your gut, to override its whispers with logic and shoulds. Relearn it. Try this experiment. For 1 week, make every minor decision based on immediate visceral reaction. What you eat, what you wear, whether you accept an invitation. No pros and cons lists. No mental gymnastics to justify your preferences. Just the primal simplicity of, does this feel like a yes or a no? You'll be shocked at how much of your life has been spent betraying your instincts in the name of politeness or productivity. The body knows what the mind has forgotten. Poet John Keats coined this term for being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. Most people rush to fill voids, with relationships, jobs, ideologies, because emptiness terrifies them. But it's in the not knowing that true self-discovery happens. Can you sit with the question, "Who am I?" without rushing to answer it? Can you tolerate the vertigo of uncertainty long enough for something real to emerge? The false self craves resolution. The true self thrives in the fertile dark of unanswered questions. Rebellion isn't one grand gesture, it's 1,000 tiny acts of defiance that crack the armor of your false self. Wear what you like, not what's deemed appropriate. Laugh when something's genuinely funny, not when laughter is expected. Admit, "I don't know," instead of faking certainty to appease others. These are the moments when light gets in, when the performance falters just long enough for your authenticity to flicker through. Find the others who've walked this path, the artists, the misfits, the ones who refuse the script. Read Rilke's letters to a young poet, where he insists, "Live the questions now." Study how David Bowie reinvented himself not as a gimmick, but as a refusal to fossilize. Listen to Nina Simone's growling definition of freedom, "No fear." These voices are your allies. They remind you that you're not crazy, you're just awake in a world that prefers sleep. The hardest part isn't starting. It's continuing when the novelty fades, when the world tries to drag you back to who you were, when you miss the comfort of your chains. This is where most fail. Don't. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust by clinging to meaning, understood this. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. You have that same power. Every moment is a chance to choose truth over comfort, even when it's mundane, even when no one is watching. The man who walked away from himself didn't do it in a day. He did it in 1,000 moments of choosing silence over small talk, choosing discomfort over delusion, choosing the terrifying aliveness of reality over the anesthetic of the familiar. Now the question is, will you? The great irony of self-estrangement is this: you were never lost, only buried. What you've been seeking, the clarity, the wholeness, the unshakable sense of being real, was never outside you. It couldn't be, because the self isn't something you find, it's something you remember. Eastern philosophies have whispered this truth for millennia. Maya, the veil of illusion. You've been conditioned to see yourself as fragmented career self, family self, public self, private self, when in reality, these are just costumes hung on the same unwavering presence beneath. Zen masters call it original face, the you before your parents named you. The you that watches thoughts arise without identifying with them. The you that was there when you were 5, 15, 50, unchanged beneath the accumulating layers of experience. This isn't mystical abstraction. Neuroscience confirms that your brain generates approximately 6,200 thoughts per day, yet you are the awareness observing them. You are not your thoughts. You are not your roles. You are the space in which these things appear and disappear. Here's the paradigm shift. Authenticity isn't something you achieve. It's something you stop resisting. Like a river that's been dammed, your natural state wants to flow. All you must do is remove the obstructions, the false beliefs, the inherited scripts, the fear of your own depths. The French philosopher Alan Watts put it succinctly: trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. This explains why so many self-help strategies fail. You cannot become yourself through effort any more than a wave can try to be water. You already are what you seek. The work isn't acquisition, it's surrender. This realization demands a funeral. The idealized self, the perfect version of you that's always just out of reach, must die. The fantasy that one day, after enough therapy or success or enlightenment, you'll finally be whole, that's the last illusion to release. As psychologist James Hollis writes, the first half of life is about building a container. The second half is about discovering what the container was meant to hold. But here's the secret: the container was always empty. The treasure was the space itself. Children don't question their being. They live it fully immersed in each moment until society teaches them to fragment. Watch a 4-year-old paint. There's no critic in their head, no fear of the painting being good. There's just color, movement, joy. This is your birthright. Not childishness, but childlikeness, the capacity to engage with reality directly, without the filter of, how does this make me look? The Japanese call this shoshin, beginner's mind. It's not about ignorance, but about approaching each experience as if for the first time. Because in truth, it is the first time this exact moment, with this exact configuration of circumstances, will never come again. After all this talk of awakening, here's the most subversive truth. You don't have to be special. The pressure to find your purpose is just another cage. What if your purpose is simply to exist, fully and without apology? To drink your morning coffee with complete attention? To laugh with a stranger? To feel the sun on your skin without needing to Instagram it? In a world obsessed with legacy, the real revolution is leaving no trace, being so present that when you're gone, the wind erases your footprints. Even the identity, I am authentic now, is another story. The moment you grasp at any self-concept, even an enlightened one, you've created new chains. This is the ultimate freedom, to wear identities lightly. To know you're not the role, but the actor who can step in and out of roles at will. As the Upanishads declare, Tattvam asi, thou art that. Not this or that label, but the boundless awareness behind all labels. Never actually left. He simply stopped believing he was who he thought he was. And in that cessation, in that glorious, terrifying not knowing, he discovered something paradoxical. The more you release the need to define yourself, the more yourself you become. Like a mirage vanishing to reveal the oasis was there all along. There are no steps left, no techniques, no more seeking. Only this. Breathe. Notice. When the old habits of self-doubt arise, smile at them like old acquaintances you no longer fear. When the world tries to tell you who you are, thank it and then do exactly what feels true in that moment. Live as if you've already died, so every action comes from love, not fear. And when you forget all this, which you will, forgive yourself instantly. The path isn't linear. It's spiral. You'll revisit these lessons at deeper levels until the distinction between seeker and sought dissolves entirely. But here now, in this breath, you're already free. The only question that remains is, how will you live knowing that? If this exploration resonated with you, if it unsettled, inspired, or left you with questions that demand deeper inquiry, then this conversation is only beginning. Share your thoughts in the comments. When did you first realize the masks you wear? What truth have you been avoiding? Let's unravel this together. For those who crave more untamed ideas, subscribe and turn on notifications. The path to authenticity isn't walked alone, it's forged in dialogue, in defiance, in the quiet moments of recognition between fellow seekers. Like this video, if it challenged you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, the most radical act is to return to yourself over and over, no matter how far you've wandered. Until next time, stay dangerously awake.